want to steer you down.
Whoa, looking at you this way. This is
We
really,
like him sideways.
yeah, I do. Anyway, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Thursday, not week, the 27th, March 27th. And we have with us our committee member, Troy, who's sitting in the hot seat. He's going to quickly walk us through a couple of the bills he's introduced. And then we can have committee discussions on whether we want to pursue further work on this or not. So Troy, it's all yours. And you do look weird sitting down there. Nice to see you like this.
Confidence that you're going to get used to it. I have a lot of bills. I could be up here 5-6 times. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, for enduring me. Troy Hedrick, representative from Burlington, and I am pleased to be here. I just realized that my notes, like if I share my notes, you're going to see I don't know how to see my notes on here and you see that on here. I tried presenter view, but that didn't work. So I'm going to.
Worth it to send that to, are your notes on this document or you have separate?
Yeah, if I did presenter view, you're going to see my notes.
Well, I wonder if you sent your document.
Yeah,
that
Phil.
document to Phil and have
Have
Phil
it,
share
Phil.
the screen.
Yeah, maybe Phil, do you mind showing that and I can just say advance? Let's do it that way. So I got to stop sharing, right?
Yep. Can I joke with you?
I have some words.
We want to see your notes.
Oh, they're just because I want to deliver them, Kevin. I know.
Sure.
I want some theater here.
Interest going to her.
Where do I start?
You have to go from.
You can just exit out.
Oh, yeah, I can leave where's my exit though?
Underneath Phil Petty,
Yeah, heading
that
up
red
and
button
probably.
you can't see.
Yeah.
I will say this might be one of the prettiest presentations you've gotten. So.
One of the what?
Where's my exit though?
Prettiest?
Yeah.
What about the yoga? I'm gonna trust you.
All the other ones are very. Let's say,
Boring?
well,
Dry,
yeah, dry. I think
Dry.
that's a very.
dry.
It's very academic.
Yeah.
So. And then you want me to go to a different place, right?
It's very prettier than this.
Yeah, and just go to
It's pinkish.
go to the first slide, Phil. Up on
First
top.
slide.
Yeah. But if you could turn it into go to, if you go up to slideshow up there.
Just a second, I got something in my screen in my way.
Yeah, so did I when I was trying to.
Okay, why isn't it?
There you go. From beginning. Far left.
Yep.
There we go. All right. So to start with, I would like to think, and I hope that I would find agreement in the room, that I'm fairly pragmatic. I'm pragmatic enough to realize how some of my more progressive political goals come across as difficult to accomplish. I get it. I do believe that the goals associated with corrections and correction reform are possible. Painful, maybe, possible. Yes, expensive, probably. This is, I'm going to talk more about my goals with this presentation here in a second, but this is going to require a paradigm shift. And I don't know what the critical mass is. How many of us have to start thinking that this is possible before we start seeing the impact of that paradigm shift? But I do believe reform is possible. I am grateful personally to be in a state and to be in this committee with the approach to corrections that we have. I'm incredibly impressed with our commissioner and his team. I am nothing but grateful for the workers we have in our institutions, and everything I talk about with regard to corrections reform is most certainly designed to see those facilities as both housing the incarcerated and a workplace. Every time we talk about our facilities, we have to realize that we're talking about a workplace as well, and that incredibly dedicated Vermonters live in or work in those spaces on a daily basis. So that is certainly part of my motivation when I start talking about corrections reform. My ask today, and you're going to hear more about what my pragmatic goals are. My ask is that you hold back from jumping to questions about practicality, affordability, and if you find yourself jumping to that, maybe use that as a way to remind yourself that that's not what we're doing today. We're talking about the paradigm. We're talking about, is this something worth considering deeper? And if so, do we want to start playing with policy? And I am more than open to hearing not now, Troy. I have really kind of a three-tiered goal about what I want to get out of that. I'm going to start with my C goal. My C goal is, at the very least, you might come out of this conversation with an ability to explain where Troy is coming from. Not agree with Troy, but to say, I've listened to him, this is where I think he's coming from. That's my C goal. My B goal is, maybe I got some more thinking to do. And maybe I'm going to do that over the next 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, my time in office. I want to think about this some more. I'm perfectly happy with that as a B goal. My A goal is let's start moving some policy. I don't care where we end up. C goal is fine with me. If you don't get to C goal, let's have a conversation over lunch. Let's work it out in the cafeteria. So that's kind of how I'm approaching, especially these two bills. And I think it's important that if you know me, like my parents know me, you're going to quickly realize how infuriating it is for me to hear, because that's how we've always done it.
Yeah.
And my parents are both alive. If they ever come to visit, I will bring them into the room and we can talk about some of the ways I've reacted to that rationale for questions I've asked them. And I don't think as a country, as a society, we do a good enough job of truly understanding how we got here. And we fall comfortably into, because that's just how it's always happened. In this context, how did we become a country that is okay with how we treat our incarcerated labor, how we exploit our incarcerated, in this case, Vermonters, through the use of what I would call predatory pricing on commissary and telecommunications? I don't think we truly understand as a society how that happened. So I'm going to do I don't know if it's going to be brief or not, but I'm going to explain kind of the origins of this mentality. And it starts with the 13th Amendment.
Do you have Phil advancing it?
Oh, can you advance? Yeah, thank you.
I don't have controls on my screen, so.
Can you just hit an arrow button?
Yeah, the arrow button didn't work, but I can scroll down.
Okay.
You've got it. It changed. There it is.
Okay. It might just be a delay too, Phil. I don't know. This is the 13th Amendment of the United States, and everything about where we are today with how we treat incarcerated labor is within the commas. I hate to bring him back into the conversation, but there is an exception clause that I'll say more about to the 13th Amendment that reads, right, so the 13th Amendment is what abolished slavery in this country, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Can you advance, Phil? Quick little timeline. The Emancipation Proclamation. This is essentially Abraham Lincoln's executive order. He issued that on January 1st, 1863, where he announced that we're going to be abolishing slavery. It took until June 19th. This is the celebration, Juneteenth every year, and it's a federal holiday now. June 19th, 1865. So 2.5 years later, that's how long. This was not the era of social media, right? So when President Lincoln issued his executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation, it took until 1865, June, to reach the final places where it had to reach in Texas. That's what we celebrate on Juneteenth. The fact that the whole country now realized that this is what the president said. We're going to abolish slavery. That's not the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment was ratified even later than that, December of that year, 1865, right? And the way we got that ratified was to concede to the southern states, essentially, yeah, but I'm still going to get my free labor, right? We can abolish slavery, but still need somebody to pick my tobacco, right? And the way we did that by saying if they're incarcerated, you don't have to pay them for their labor. So then this generated the Black Codes, right? These are all the codes that almost immediately were put into place. This is where we got vagrancy laws from. This is where we prohibited Black Americans from owning property in certain areas. This is where curfews, travel restrictions, employment constraints, all of these started popping up, so that the effect of which was then to incarcerate more and more Black Americans because of the exception clause to the 13th Amendment. Those Black codes then evolved into the Jim Crow laws, right? And the Jim Crow laws have just continually evolved over time, well into the 21st century. Black codes are now what we would, right? How did we define cocaine use in the inner cities versus how did we define cocaine use on Wall Street or in the clubs of New York City? And what were the penalties for those? Crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. It's all cocaine. Broken windows policing, stop and frisk, driving while Black, right? These are all examples of how Jim Crow laws, Black codes have evolved over the hundreds of years since we ratified the 13th Amendment with that exception clause in place. If you want more on this, can you advance for me, Phil? A movie, documentary that is amazing is Ava DuVernay's 13th. I think it's still available on Netflix. Talks very specifically about how we came from the 13th Amendment to the mass incarceration of BIPOC individuals today. The New Jim Crow, if you want to read, is an amazing book. I have a copy at home if you want to borrow it. Those are ways to kind of continue your education on how the impact of that exception clause brings us to today, and the crisis, I'll call it, of mass incarceration and the overrepresentation of Black Americans, especially in our carceral system. Up until can you advance for me, Phil? Up until 2022, Vermont's Article 1 read very similarly. All right, so this is the article in our Vermont Constitution that mirrors the 13th Amendment. And can you advance one more time for me, Phil? This is how that exception clause shows up. I put it in blue here in our state constitution. Just going to read the blue. No person ought to be holden by law to serve any person as a servant, slave, or apprentice, unless, here's the exception, bound by law for the payment of debts, damages, fines, costs, or the like. That's the exception clause and how it reads in the Vermont Constitution, or how it read until 2022. Can you advance for me, Phil? With Prop 2 in 2022, we decided to change that. We decided to change Article 1 of Vermont's Constitution, and it was approved by 88.71% of Vermont voters. This is how it reads now. I'm a slide. Don't change yet, Phil. We added indentured servitude to Article 1. That wasn't there before Prop 2. And we struck out a lot of language. And at the end, we added the clause, slavery and indentured servitude in any form are prohibited. Indentured servitude in any form is prohibited by our state constitution. I'm going to punctuate that because I'm going to come back to it in a second. Can you advance for me, Phil? Like I said, Prop 2 of 2022 is what made these changes. And we're about to see another proposition with labor law. That is a tough hurdle to pass. It's got to pass through both chambers 2 years in a row. It's got to go to the Vermont voters, and it's got to pass. This one passed by 88.71%. That's how important I read that as a mandate. It is to re-clarify that the Vermont State Constitution prohibits slavery and indentured servitude in any form. Can you advance for me, Phil? This is testimony we heard from DOC earlier this session. Just as a reminder, wages paid to incarcerated Vermonters range anywhere from 25 cents an hour to a max of $1.25 per hour. There is a bonus, a 10-cent bonus, if you want to call that a bonus, to where you could earn up to $1.35. I consider that to be a form of indentured servitude. Can you advance for me, Phil? That's my take on it. That doesn't have to be your take on it. I think that's a fairly objective take on it, but I'm in the hot seat. I think prison labor, as we define it or as we pay for it here in Vermont, is a form of indentured servitude. Indentured servitude is prohibited by our state constitution. I'm just going to pause just in case. Do people need to read that a little further? Or are we good?
Yeah, hold on 1 sec.
Yeah.
And I assume, Troy, you'd rather have conversation, questions, whatever at the end?
Yeah, and I just, yeah, I'm not going to debate like the merits of this because I'm fine with my C goal. That you just understand better where I'm coming from. Do you want to pause for questions now? Would be helpful.
Well, no, just a point of clarification. The 13th, the Emancipation Proclamation specifically only applied to areas in rebellion. So, which is an important distinction.
It led to the 13th Amendment.
In the 13th Amendment, there was no compromise in southern states. Because it went through Congress in
Okay,
1864.
we're not going to do the debate thing right now.
It's not a debate. It's just,
Okay.
they weren't voting for the United States at the time.
Okay, I'm going to move us along. Additionally, just for foundational knowledge, the Vermont Department of Corrections contracts with Keefe Group to provide commissary services, Global Tellink to provide telecommunication services. Each contract provides pretty significant profit margins that, in my opinion, exploit incarcerated Vermonters and their families. If you look at the profit margins of Keefe Group especially, and if you compare them to Walmart, if you compare them to Target, if you compare them to Amazon, the profit margins are exponentially higher for the Keefe Group. And I sent you an article last night, very much not, it's a biased, it's Vermont Justice, right? It's an advocacy group. Nonetheless, I think they make the point that to charge what we charge incarcerated Vermonters for things that they need beyond the basics, to me, is unethical. So there's a constitutional argument to be made, and there's an ethical argument to be made. I'm trying to bring both to the table. Let's advance. I'm going to start talking about 294 now. So this is the bill that would mandate compensation at the federal minimum wage level, which is $7 something an hour right now, $7 and something cents an hour. The delta between what we pay our labor, Vermont, our incarcerated labor, and what it would cost to pay them the federal minimum wage. The testimony I've received from DOC is that it's about $1.3 million delta right now. Essentially, that's what the DOC is saving by not paying their incarcerated labor for the work that they do. And some of the work that they do is labor that would have to be done if they didn't do it.
Can you repeat that delta? What did you say?
1.3 million,
1.3.
approximately. Yeah. This is not specifically stated in the bill. It's more general. The bill just states that the DOC would have the ability to move those wages into a special fund. I think we would be best served, and Representative Chena brought some of this into legislation during the last biennium, If we decided how to use that special fund, I think good uses of that fund are a victim restitution fund. So that labor is also providing restitution to people harmed by the folks who are incarcerated. I think a savings account that is available upon release so that there's not this immediate need to find quick pay, which leads to recidivism, or being paid to dependents that incarcerated folks leave behind. I think that's a good use of that fund. And then I think a portion of those wages used immediately for commissary that would ideally not be exploited, exploitive profit margins. But that would be worked out in committee if we decided to take up this sort of bill. But I think there are ways to do that. And the bill does stipulate that interest made on those funds goes right back into what's now being used as a recreation fund. So there are stipulations to that in 294. Can you advance for me, Phil? The bill 294 stipulates that any contract to provide commissary services in state correctional facilities must ensure that prices do not exceed the fair market value of comparable products sold in the community where the facility is located by more than 10%. This just aims to end that exploitive market, that when we have a captive audience, to give them one opportunity to buy goods that are marked up so significantly high, I think, again, is unethical. And then key aspects of 294 also would require free telecommunications. It is 2025. We have talked a lot about how ridiculous it is and how far behind we are just on Wi-Fi. Once we get Wi-Fi in place, I think there are creative ways that we can ensure telecommunications are free. We all pull out our phones, and yes, we pay a contract to our phone company. I can FaceTime my daughter in Baltimore at the drop of a hat. I can call my wife anytime I want if I'm having a bad day. I think we have to be much more open to how communications and how connections are maintained for our incarcerated Vermonters. I do think that less stressed incarcerated folks makes it easier for our workers as well. There are states who are already doing this, free telecommunications as of 2023 and late 2023 and early 2024. California, Connecticut, Minnesota, Massachusetts, and Colorado all have statutes we could look at as we're looking at this. Could you advance for me, Phil? This is just a study. This is a report. If you want more information, we can water this bill down. On or before January 1st, 2026, the Department of Corrections shall evaluate its contracts with Global Tellink Corporation and the Keith Group and report to the General Assembly on whether those would be considered exploitive and whether those vendors, compared to other vendors who might be doing the same thing, are providing out of scale prices. So that's just a study. That's just a report that's in there. Let's go to 191. Can you advance for me, Phil? Ending profit on prisoners altogether. This gets away from the 13th Amendment and Article 1 of Vermont's Constitution. This is just the question of whether or not it's ethical to profit at all from keeping people in incarcerated beds. This is our contract with Mississippi. I don't think it is. Spoiler alert. Honestly, 191. You like that one? 191 really just sets up a 10-year roadmap. That's what 191 tries to do. Let's have the department commit to, here, let me just, can you advance one more for me, Phil? And I'm going to do this one quickly. And then there's kind of three basic reasons why I think moving away from out-of-state facilities and for-profit facilities are important. I think we can facilitate better oversight of Vermonters who are incarcerated if they are in Vermont. I think incarcerated access to their legal counsel is improved if they are close by. And certainly family visitation is a huge component of that. So key aspects of H91, the Department of Corrections is tasked with creating a comprehensive plan to bring back incarcerated individuals currently housed in out-of-state facilities. The goal would be to complete this reparation by 2034, reflecting the General Assembly's intent to eliminate the practice of housing Vermont inmates in privately operated for-profit or out-of-state correctional facilities within a decade.
Are those your notes or is that on the screen?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not on the
Can
screen.
you advance it one more, Phil?
Okay, wait.
Yeah. I'll let you read that. This is actually my last screen, other than the screen.
I think it's.
There, that one.
There we go. Keep that.
So that's in a nutshell, 294 and 191. I mean, you all know by now kind of where I stand on the issue of exploitative practices in our carceral facilities. I am interested in moving policy on this. And I joke, knowing pragmatically that where I reside on the political spectrum of that question. But I do think it's a question worth asking. I'm fine if that question or that in-depth look takes us years. I know that's part of it. I do really encourage you to read that book, The New Jim Crow, or view the documentary 13th by Ava DuVernay. Really kind of paints this historical, how did we get here question. Can you advance one more, Phil, because I'm done.
I stopped. the
No,
share.
Oh, that's all right. All right. Yeah. So again, Seagull, at least I know where Troy's coming from. B-Goal, maybe I'm going to think about this a little bit more. A-Goal, let's go. Let's move some policy.
So Troy, I know the moratorium, sending folks out of state, we dealt with this, was it last year, the year before, and we did do language.
It was pretty, yeah, it was intent. It was the intent. I tried to find it last night and I couldn't find it.
It wasn't on the Capitol bill.
It wasn't.
It was on a,
Oh, it was in the miscellaneous corrections bill, whatever we called it. I can find it in that.
that's where it was.
Yeah.
And there was a report back, they were supposed to do some work on that. We might want to find out
Yeah.
where that is. So that's how we addressed it last year.
And which of the issues was this talking about or studying?
The
Ending
Repatriation, yeah.
on state beds.
Well, I just,
Okay.
I don't know how many people have anything to say. I just wanted more of a process comment, which is for new people especially, this isn't a time to debate whether you think any information was accurate, inaccurate, et cetera. This is a presentation. Now we talk about, do you want to take it up? You know, the merits to that. It's not like later, if we took it up, then you start talking about, well, I disagree with this policy for whatever. So just like keep it in that context.
So then tell me if I'm out of line with what I'm gonna ask. Like, just cut me off. I think it's just more getting some clarity on it. So let's just take the wage part, the fair wage part, for example. If the wage incrementally or altogether just goes up, what does that do to the services that they already receive? Like, for example, someone that's on the minimum wage in Vermont that is not in an incarcerated setting would pay for their own health care, all their own travel, all their own living expenses. But I'm assuming that in an incarcerated setting, that would still be provided for, correct?
By statute, we have.
I said, so that's just my question. Are we wanting to tie it to the minimum wage or to a wage that would take into account those things that we have in statutory law?
I don't know the answer to the question. I can tell you that the Vermont minimum wage is much higher than the federal minimum wage, so I don't know if that gets rid of that concern for you or not. And just personally not a fan of that zero sum, well, if they're getting it, then we should too, sort of argument. I'm not saying you're arguing. For me, the fundamental ethical question is around the labor question. All labor is valuable. And to expect labor from our incarcerated Vermonters and to say that's only worth 25 cents an hour or $1.25 an hour, to me is indefensible. Yeah, so I think it's a valid question.
And I'm on B with you.
And what, yeah. But what is the cost of all they're receiving? I weigh that against the fact that the state has removed their liberty, right? And we have that to me turns into an obligation that the state then has to make sure that in your care, in your question, healthcare is provided.
Well, in that 1.3 figure that you gave us is important because I don't think that that's the crux of the issue is that they're saving money on top of everything. You know, they may be spending money on their housing situation, their healthcare situation, on the meals and all that, but they're still saving money at the end of the day. So I could see that being the argument there. So I was just curious kind of what that took into account. So I think workshopping that would be something to pursue.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'd be your foil on the vast preponderance of this, Troy. But that said,
Wow.
I know another shocker. But I think that the commissary and telecommunications spaces might be easier to look at. I don't know much about them, so it's hard to have an opinion because I just don't know what kind of pricing or experiences incarcerated individuals are having at this point in time. But
Do you want me to read the intent language from last year?
Yeah, and I'll also, so this is part for new members. This is part of a process when a committee decides whether or not to do further work on a bill. You hear from the sponsor, the reasoning behind the bill, some of the language, maybe. But it's a very broad overview. If the committee is interested in pursuing either one of these bills or both, then we set up testimony to bring in folks to testify. And to Joe's question, you talk to DOC, find out what your contracts are, find out what the cost is, find out how it plays in with DOC's world and their budgeting. Talk to folks who are delivering some of these services, possibly talk to advocate communities that support the bill. So you bring in a variety of folks to really get an understanding of how that piece, the commissary works out, because it's very, very complicated for that. In terms of the other bill, for the out-of-state beds, again, it would be hearing from DOC what the cost is, how it plays out, what the contract is, what would happen if we didn't have the out-of-state beds. And also you can bring in family members of folks, family members of those folks who are down in Mississippi, and listen to all sides and then figure out how you do the language in the bill. So if you want to work on this bill, there's a lot of work that needs to occur. And a lot of
Different bills.
Yeah, either one, both, either one.
Can I just read the language from, this pertains to H191.
And we did
This
this
is-
last year.
Yep, and it became Act 159 of 2024. Section 6, correctional facilities and inmate population reduction report. There's some intent language. The General Assembly finds that the population of inmates in Vermont has risen from approximately 300 detainees per day in 2020 to approximately 500 detainees per day in 2024, while the sentenced population has remained relatively stable during the same time period. It is the intent of the General Assembly that by 2034, this is kind of what was in H191, the practice of Vermont inmates being housed in privately operated for-profit or out-of-state correctional facilities shall be prohibited. Again, this is just intent language, so that corporations are not enriched for depriving the liberty of persons and sentenced to imprisonment. It is further the intent of the General Assembly that such a prohibition does not affect inmates who are incarcerated pursuant to interstate compacts. So sometimes there are interstate agreements that require us to house Vermonters out of state. The report is due on November 15th of this year, 2025, in consultation with the judiciary. Kind of the roadmap, what would it take to get there? Like,
So Going back to,
November 15th, 2025. So written report to the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions, Senate Committee on Judiciary, dealing with methods to reduce the number of offenders and detainees in Vermont correctional facilities. And then there's a bunch of things that the report shall include.
I don't know if we did get the report, did we?
November of this year.
November this year. November this year.
Yeah.
So, Right?
I called on it.
That's-
I get that to the table and it's like.
I know, you're not chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understood both what you said and what the vice chair said, and I understand the reasoning behind it. We're not getting into all the various questions. Has the committee taken testimony or has the presenter done research that could quickly address that? Like, do these people, Global Tel, Lincoln Keith Group, are they monopolistic? Is there something about being in a correctional facility that adds a ton to the services they offer? Do we have so many people in Mississippi that we'd have to build another facility? Like, I don't, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, we've taken testimony on some of that.
Not the
stuff.
key, not the commissary stuff, and
commissary.
that's essentially what you were asking
Right,
before.
it's a broader, it's very, very complicated.
This is what I know from the commissioner when I told him, and we had a meeting last summer and I said, I'm messing around with this. And he said, I don't think, and I don't want to speak for him. I think he will acknowledge that this is worth looking at.
Mhm.
I think he will also identify statute that prohibit them from doing commissary in state. I think he's well informed on states that do commissary in state and telecommunications in state. So I don't think the commissioner is a hurdle on this, on the commissary and telecommunications, if we leave fair pay out of it. And for him, again, I don't want to speak on his behalf. You know, if we're going to if we're going to create a statute that raises the wages for incarcerated labor, he's going to need money, and that's a fair point.
Your comment just now, I didn't understand what you meant by in-state, to do commissary in-state.
Like, what's keeping the Department of Corrections from going to Costco and running their own commissary,
Gotcha.
or having a, you know, Costco socks, right, or whatever,
Yes.
however they do it. And he thinks that there are some current statutes in the way of.
So those are some of the things we can work on. Also, the other thing, and if once you're on this committee for a while, you'll be getting constituent calls about family members who are incarcerated. And the whole commissary thing is really can be difficult for families because most folks who are incarcerated are dependent on family members to provide them money to put in their account to buy items from the commissary. And if a lot of them don't have family members or they don't have the economic ability to do that, then they don't have access to the commissary. And then maybe their cellmate does. And then you get into contraband and you can really get into some power struggles between folks who are incarcerated. So it really feeds into the culture of folks who are incarcerated. And also there are incarcerated folks that don't have the same access to other incarcerated folks, depending on the economic status of their family. And also their relationships with their family, because if they're estranged from their family, they have no way to get this. In commissary, it could be extra pair of socks,
Yeah.
could be a candy bar. It could be toothpaste. It could be toothbrushes. And if you don't have money to put in there,
And
that's what you gotta balance out.
3 questions that 294 tries to ask, 3 very different questions. Fair pay is certainly different than commissary, which is different than telecommunications, and the lift on those 3 questions might be separately different.
And a lot of work. And also with telephone usage, it's not where inmates, folks who are incarcerated have free access to call anybody they want. It has to be approved by DOC. And there's a real limitation in terms of who a person who's incarcerated can call. They can call their lawyer, They may not be able to call a wife
Mhm.
or a partner because there could be domestic violence, domestic assault. Maybe the family member does not want to be contacted. DOC works through that. So it could be different for each person who's incarcerated. So it's not that they have total access to anyone they can call. There's real limitations that are placed on them
Mhm.
by DOC, and it's specific per person.
Mhm.
So it's a real educational level to really understand the nuts and bolts of how these items are carried out in a corrections facility. It is not how we assume it to be. I just want to be clear on that. And it's a good learning. You know, if we worked on these two bills, the committee's interested in working on these two bills, or one bill versus another bill. It's a really good learning process for committee members to start understanding how the Department of Corrections operates. And what are the challenges for the department in running their facilities, and what are the challenges in each one of those facilities for our staff as well as for folks who are incarcerated. It's a good learning environment if we work on one or both of those bills
Mhm.
for the committee members to start understanding DOC. Right?
So I'm super into it. It seems like now that we got the capital bill out, we have time, but I'm aware that other people might have other priorities, and so I don't know. I don't want to usurp the chair's role, but I'm wondering if other members have different
Yes.
things they'd want to discuss more.
I want to see where the committee is. Is there interest in bringing and doing a little bit further work in this? I would suggest the next piece is to have DOC in and what their take is on both of these bills. And then committee will have a little bit more knowledge, or what's the thinking here for folks?
It was me and I had my druthers. Just want to use that word today. 294, there's parts that I probably am less supportive of, but there are parts that I am more interested in. I think there are easier lifts, as we say. I'd be interested that 191 is much less currently lower on my support level, but 294 I would be certainly interested in taking up to at least have a conversation and get to the commissary and tell the communications part especially.
For folks?
I mean, I think 191 is actually maybe even more important than 294 for the sense that when we're talking about all these things, it's hard to do that in a private prison setting. And I mean, I know that we, contract some of our services, but I think that that's important to look at. But I mean, in terms of other bills, I know I'm probably one of the few people, but I still think 252 should.
You still think what I did?
That 252, we should hear something on that because I think that we need to hear a little bit more about earned time, but
Other folks?
That's all right. I'm not from Northfield, so.
You were okay with the like learning more commissary and health.
Yes, I said that. My comments were very similar.
Yeah.
It's in the water, frankly.
It was unintentional.
I would
trying
like
to-
to hear more information. Can be both or the commissary one probably to start with, but I'd be happy to have more information and review.
And I agree with Mary. I'd like to hear more on both as well. I think that there's validity. I mean, I struggle with the money part of it, but I can't see how you can't have it both ways, that you pay someone 25 cents an hour, but you charge them $7 for a bag of potato chips. To me, that's so hypocritical and so ugly. If you're gonna pay them 25 cents and charge them 25 cents for a bag of potato chips, I mean, that I could see that. It's just that with
Disparity.
that, yeah, I don't like that. But I'd be willing to hear more about both of them myself.
Anyone else?
You say, Brian, you're awfully quiet.
He's thinking. Bill?
Also, or you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry, I looked at the wall and I forgot about 298. I think that one's really important pending some federal stuff.
Which one is that, Will?
That's the one about the immigration stuff. I think we need to really
Restricting
get someone in
DLC.
about that, you know.
Push that button.
Yeah, thunder storm
You know,
industry.
You're picking your rights, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
So what I'm hearing is there is interest to at least get some background information in terms of how the commissary works, how the phone systems work. How if we were to not put folks out of state and bring them back home, what that implies. And then probably the third thing is really looking at the wage and compensation. And I think the best way to start this so that you don't get in depth of arguing the merits of it back and forth, because I don't think we want to go down that road at this point. I think that for testimony, what really needs to happen, and we can do this next week, if we can get DOC in here, to really talk how commissary works, what it is, how it works, how much money, what the contracts are that DOC is in, how long those contracts are in effect for, can they break a contract? Those are the issues that we need to really find out, both the commissary, well, that's for your telephone, maybe your commissary, and then also the out-of-state beds to get a handle on that. And then we can transition into the wages.
And again, we are getting a report in November on the
out-of-state
out-of-state.
beds. But I think it's important for the committee to understand those dynamics and, you know, we're in the throes of trying to replace the women's facility. And what does it imply if we bring back 120 or 130 male offenders and our detainee population keeps increasing? This is really good learning information for the committee to start understanding the dynamics of DOC. This would be good starting points.
We thank you for that.
So I'm feeling like Beagle. I'm sitting around
B
Beagle.
to A. I mean,
Potentially D, we're not.
oh,
Yeah.
I think we have some C people here.
No,
C and B.
Would you?
I'm definitely C.
Jill's got
Or
your
C
B
minus.
minus.
No, C plus or B, C plus or B minus.
Kevin, you'll come along.
And
Don't worry.
especially when you have time, I think like what Alice just said is really important. It's like, and I know even upstairs, we worked on this with certain people all the time. Listen, like have steps where you just listen, take it in and process it rather than being ready to argue. Like just like listen to what other people are saying, listen to the information. In this case, if DOC comes in, it's not whether it doesn't matter at one point whether we agree, any of us agree or disagree with what's being said. We'll get to that point. But if, and you guys are a good group of people, so I don't really have to say this too, but like it happens here where people will get into debates. I don't agree with what you just said, so they never get through all the points. So let everybody come and give us information so we can all learn from it. And then we can start debating, you know, what we've heard. I mean, it to me is the best way to do things, but.
So even though a bill is introduced with particular language, it's up to the committee to take testimony and balance all that testimony that you've heard. Some of it you're going to agree with and some of it you're not going to agree with. And figure out what language you put in that hopefully everyone in the committee can agree to, but that's not always going to happen. Kevin, do you want to say?
I guess I feel obligated to expose where I'm coming from a little bit just for conversation. Intellectually, philosophically, I'd love to dig into all of this. It would be fascinating and helpful. I'm not sure it should be our highest priority. I don't know what other bills we have that I would say were higher priority, but it doesn't solve Vermont's problems that we need to be addressing, in my personal opinion. The second thing is that I'm amongst the minority that voted against the constitutional change because I knew this is where we were going to be going. And I think we need to be looking out for the law-abiding citizens first, because I don't believe across the board that the state has single-handedly taken their liberty away. I think the individuals that are incarcerated forfeited their freedom because of the actions they took And there's lots of reasons why they did that. So philosophically, I think we need to think about all that. And then the bottom line in one way is when we talk about their needs aren't being met, I have a problem with that. We should be treating people humanely in the incarceration areas. So maybe we need to augment what we give them, but incarceration is for three main purposes in my mind: protection of the public, punishment to be a deterrent, and if there's opportunity for rehabilitation, those three things. But we can't just focus only on the rehabilitation
And forget why.
forget the other reasons, because that's not fair. And I don't like to use that term. That's just not the reason for incarceration. It's one of the goals. So if they need socks and they need t-shirts and they need ramen noodles, then we should pay for those rather than making them pay for them. But then again, maybe they don't need ramen noodles. Maybe they need 3 square meals a day that are healthy for them, along with medical care. And there's a lot of people on the outside that aren't getting either of those, and we're not paying for them. So that's where I'm coming from. And if this is highest priority, I welcome all the testimony. I'm looking forward to it.
You know, it might be good also to have a conversation with Judge Zone. In terms, it's the judiciary that makes the decision of whether someone goes under state custody or not. And that's not true. That's not just for someone who gets incarcerated. It's also true for someone who is in the state hospital, because those are involuntary admissions. That's not voluntary. They're under state custody. They're under the Commissioner of Department of Mental Health. Involuntary meds, that's another, that's through the court system. It's courts that determine this. It's taking away someone's liberty. It's taking away their judgment. The ability to make those judgment calls for themselves. It might be really worth it to have a broad conversation with Judge Zone just to see, because it's a judiciary that makes those decisions. And it might be a good conversation for folks to have on that. Be willing to, I'm sure Judge Zone would be more than willing to come in and have that conversation if people are interested in that. Because it goes way beyond just someone being under DOC, because we do take other people's freedoms and freedom of movement and freedom of action away. And we do it also for justice-involved juveniles. That's what Woodside was all about. They were under the custody of the Department of Children and Family Services. So
Judiciary is going to have a huge impact too on whether or not judiciary is going to have a huge impact on whether or not we can bring Vermonters back, because the detainee population is by and large controlled by judiciary backlog.
DOC has no.
Okay.
And I think it would also be good to ask the judge, does penalties for a crime offer deterrence? Because people are very conflicted on that. Does knowing that there's an incarcerated sentence at the end, if you behave this way, I'm going to be in jail, does that really deter someone from acting out or not? And I think maybe the judge could weigh in on that in terms of what they see coming through the courts all the time. We are lay people that have, what we see. We see it a certain way, but once you're sitting on the bench, when you see this, you may have a different perspective, and it might be worth to pick his brain on this. So committee members are willing. Is that something that would be interesting?
Well, as far as that goes, I guess I would like to see the best argument presented by either side. One that thinks, it's the certainty and the swiftness of punishment, and the other who thinks it's the severity. And give me some data from both sides. I don't know if we can get that.
I don't know.
There's certainly national studies and stuff that will conclude differently.
So let's at least get some testimony on next week, because we've got time next week, with DOC to talk about just the structure of the telephone, commissary, and the structure of what am I going to miss here? The work programs and the pay, and then the structure of the out-of-state bids.
Super.
And then we can also reach out to Judge Zone He's gonna be coming in to talk about the court houses and jurisdiction.
Mm.
If he's available, and we can go into this issue of the judiciary making these decisions of pulling someone into state custody. What's involved in that? And does that really deter someone from acting out if they know that there's going to be a penalty or a sentence or incarceration, or in the juvenile justice of a 15-year-old's acting out, do they realize they're going to end up in a possible incarcerated setting, and that will deter them? I think that would be a good conversation as well to have with the judge.
I know Judge Zone isn't available next week because he's at a couple of conferences, but
The following week, yeah. So what other, we've got 32, H32, where Katie's coming back
Mhm.
with another witchmadingy, another draft. I would like to get John Gray in at some point to go over what we did with the courthouses.
Mhm.
But I don't know if we should have the judge in first, or we should have John in to go through previous legislation that was done.
originally you wanted the judge in first.
Right.
Terry Corsones is gonna come in either in his place or in addition to him next Tuesday at 1 o'clock.
Okay,
And I've reached out to John, but I haven't heard back from him yet.
okay, because it would be good if he could find the legislation that we at least passed out of committee.
Mhm.
Kevin?
This may be a tangent, but we heard testimony on, I think it's called the Vines program, where we're
Yeah, victim
communicating.
notification, yeah.
And I personally think that to make sure there's enough money for the offended individuals, knowing what's going
The
on,
victim?
the victims, is a higher priority than, and I'm gonna try to just be a little light, than providing ramen noodles for the incarcerated. That, the people on the outside, the victims, having enough people to call them in a timely fashion, explain what's going on, to me is a higher priority than 191 and
But didn't
94.
Jennifer Pullman come back and say that they had conversations with DOC, and DOC is working with their vendor
She did, but I mean, I don't know where they
for
ended up
vents
though.
because there was some technical glitches there?
There was encouragement that the system might be able to do it, but I'm
Right.
not sure there's enough people or
Yes.
the vendor doing something so that they can utilize it properly. I don't think we got to a conclusion that the victims are being properly
And
informed.
I'm trying to remember where Field was working with Jennifer on this, or did we just tell Jennifer to
I think it
go?
was the three of us spoke with Jennifer and she gave
Yeah.
us the indication that there was some system assistance.
So let's get her back. Get her
Okay,
back in and talk about where we are. And DOC will need to be in the room as well, because this is run by DOC. On the VINS, Vines, Vines.
is that something you do or Phil does or I do?
Phil
Phil
will do it.
that.
Yeah, we'll schedule that in for next week. So you get an update on that. Are there other?
That's gonna get us a little ways in.
Gonna get us, yeah.
If we could, not to harp on it, but if we can go see some flood damage or whatever,
Yep.
and that'd be kind of interesting, especially for new
New
people.
member, yep.
Uh,
And then that could be done on a nice day.
there's not many nice days
I
coming.
know.
They're cold, but not raining.
Can I make a request? If we're gonna make a field trip to Bennington,
Yeah, that's the other
Oh,
piece.
yeah, that's different,
Yeah.
one, but yeah.
I would love to see one of the 3B sites, just firsthand, see what
That's
the world is
good,
talking about.
yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna be there, might as well do all three.
And if we're going to do that and we could get some responsible individuals for that project to take off-site testimony on it, I would be interested in that for an education standpoint,
Yeah.
even though we've washed our hands of it. Rightfully so, I agree,
Well, as a member of the larger body, you still have responsible, so it's.
understand,
Yeah.
but we don't.
Yeah, it's like next week is the weather forecast.
Sucks.
It does, but I mean, we can walk outside if it's 49 degrees, like, for example, but,
Yeah, we're.
it's potential rain.
It depends on our schedule, but what,
It could be the week after. I'm just throwing it out there.
yeah, it might be better almost the week after, but for the Bennington one, again, it's gonna depend. I would almost suggest doing a Bennington one on a Tuesday or a Friday.
Mhm.
I would suggest doing it on a Tuesday or a Friday, and not go on the floor on Tuesday, but then we got caucuses. Or Friday.
I mean,
um,
everybody has their own different moral value or not value judgments, but I would rather miss caucus than miss floor.
Depends what's on the floor.
Well, right.
Because Tuesday, you either go down there from home and then go back to home.
Yeah.
For folks who are commuters, 1, 2, 3,
7.
4, 5, 6. And then for the people who live near there, you either come up later on that day or Wednesday. Friday, it's like you head from home and you go down and then you head back home. If you live down there, you're near home.
What's that? How far in the range?
Well, as far as caucus goes, you can dial in on your phone in the car, and listen to it.
This is like that.
Yeah.
You should be carpooling, and what I would think, is folks from Franklin County and Chittenden County would carpool. Then you really will get in
Put
trouble.
Troy on the roof.
For what it's worth,
And you'll
if
really-
the weather doesn't change, this coming Tuesday looks like a nice day. What if we could arrange to be there Tuesday morning, come back?
Oh, to Bennington?
We can't do that.
That'd be good.
That'd be too quick.
Okay.
You can't do that.
That's a week or two away.
Yeah, you gotta work with BGS and Laura Trishman. You gotta start
yeah.
working with it.
Fair. I just see the floor becoming more and more intense.
Well, no.
Well, it's gonna peak and then
And it goes down.
it's gonna die
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
Yeah, and then you get in maybe
Toward-
towards the third week in April and
yeah. Toward the end, it gets wrapped.
yeah, it's gonna die down.
Yeah. Right, good.
We did get the warning again that don't make plans until beginning of June.
Yeah.
Did we?
Well, the veto session's the 16th and 17th is what I've heard.
So you think we're gonna be here?
I didn't say that. I assumed-
No, I know, I could, yeah.
We were told by the boss, the actual boss, that you probably should not plan to do anything until the beginning of June. And if you, even in early June, you should probably get yourself refundable tickets.
Your life won't be your own. Your life will not be your own come the end of April. In the May, your life will not be. So we can engage with conversations with BGS about taking a tour of the Capitol complex. And also with BGS and Laura Trishman with thinking about going down to the monument,
Mhm.
the vet's home while we're there.
Oh, yeah.
So that would be talking to Melissa Jackson. As well as, possibly the Bennington project. Where it is. But I would almost think that would be better on a Friday.
I agree, yeah, I concur.
I think it's better on a Friday. How long from Burlington, Franklin?
3 hours.
Yeah, through.
3 hours? 2.5 from Burlington.
I'm driving 2 hours.
Yeah, but
Well,
depends where you guys all carpool. And from here, it's 2.5, right? 3 hours?
It's about two and 2:15, 2.5.
You go over Mendon Mountain, you go over Kennington or Rutland.
Marion Will, it's, 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, I get there about an hour and 15.
Well, you need to check out.
So let Phil reach out, just so these folks start seeing and we also need to get approval from the speaker not to be in the
Yeah.
building. And,
Is it possibly important though, because we've done that before, is to have the Senate institutions go as well?
we can mention it to them. I know they're up at the correctional facilities. They've been doing a lot of touring around. But for them, it's more limited because they're on 2 committees, so they may not be
You
able to do
understand?
the full day.
But if it was a day that's, you know, because it is good to have everyone see, right? What we're talking about.
I'll mention that to the chair, see if there's anything there interest. I know that they're doing a lot of touring around. It's easier with 5 people
Mhm.
than
Do it more
11.
incognito.
Yep.
Than 11 folks. So let's work that through. Work with your leadership, folks could work with your leadership to see what's up with what they're projecting. And it'll be good. Going down to Bennington, back's gonna be a long day.
Yep. Worth it though.
Really long day. That will be good. I have to figure out what I'm doing. with
I
my
mean, it's
camp.
not Boston, but you know,
I have to figure out what to do with my camp,
bring her.
but she can't stay in the car that long.
Go on a leash, we'll take her for a walk.
No. May have to go home Thursday night. And then leave from home. Friday. Okay. Anything else?
We're testifying on Friday, right?
Yeah.
We're on the
Recording.
We're recording on the board
Sorry,
tomorrow morning.
So it'd just be me driving down from here, right?
What about
You
this
got
guy?
Connor.
Oh, yeah, Connor, yep.
Yeah, you and Connor.
Oh, that could be the road.
You'd be going, they'd be going down Route 7. You'd
Yeah,
be going down
He's got a
Route 7,
cooler.
right?
Yep.
You guys will go down 89, then I'll maybe going down Route 7.
Mhm.
89.
Easy peasy, let me
That's what
squeeze
it is.
You're gonna want to go through.
Stop by Bolton on the way.
Yeah, you go from here, you're gonna go down to Bethel.
Down
get off
89
at
to Bethel, yeah.
Go over the
They're
mountain,
killing.
Route 4.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's before.
Then to.
I've done it
7.
times.
Yep. Sometimes my GPS tells me Springfield's quicker because there sometimes be a hiccup on the road. But
Ah,
That's
I-
true.
I-
I could go down, that's right, that's a good point, because I could go down Friday morning, drop the cat off and head over that way. Do that. Oh.
it's only an extra 10 minutes, but that's
Yeah.
why if it picks up traffic.
Right, and I would just leave from here. Where?
Here?
Yeah, he spends the night
Oh,
here,
well,
but
then
then
go
you,
with- go with
you
the
won't come back,
Yeah,
you
you
could
could
go
go
back
back
home.
Yeah,
You'd
yeah.
go back home though.
Well, not if he commutes his over.
no, because I wouldn't, because if I was
It's gonna all be figured out.
I would probably come back up on 7. I'm not sure. We're,
Yeah, you come back up on 7.
yeah,
yeah.
which is quicker for me.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
we're on
Yeah.
YouTube, folks, so
Yeah.
let's, if we've, I don't know, is the floor gonna be long today? Should be.
Yeah,
Yeah, we get the big bill and.
Yeah, well, just, I hope folks are okay with their reports. Please check in. I gotta get mine together. I don't do much.
It'll be fine.
So we're done for right now and we'll just keep in touch with everybody. Okay, so